Good afternoon. As Evan said, my name is Ryan Thorne. I'm the founder and CEO of Thorne Ambulance Service, operating out of Greenville, where we're headquartered. We also have a location in Lawrence, South Carolina as well. So before we really kick off today, I just want to kind of share with you a little bit about myself and some of the experience that I've had. I have been an EMS, full-time EMS provider since 2006. At that time, I worked for Thorne Ambulance Service out of the Metro Boston area. And at that time, they were the largest privately owned ambulance service in New England. And if I'm not mistaken, we responded to approximately 175,000 calls a year for service. So very large service, a lot of coverage areas. We were actually the 911 provider for 6 municipalities surrounding the southern end of Boston. And we were a primary backup provider for Boston EMS. And so that's kind of where I got my feet wet as an EMT, was kind of diving headfirst into that mess, if you will. When I moved to South Carolina, I actually went to work for Spartanburg County EMS. At that time, they were responding to approximately 44,000 911 requests for service annually. We were the sole 911 provider. There were a couple of rescue squads still remaining in the county, but we were more or less the main provider for 911 service throughout Spartanburg. I've also been involved in the fire service since 2007. I have volunteered. I've been part-time and full-time, so I've covered pretty much all spectrums of what you can do in the fire service. And as a volunteer, I spent the last 6 years in Lawrence County, reaching the rank of captain with one of our volunteer departments. As a part-time firefighter-paramedic, I served the Glassy Mountain Fire Department in the northern end of Greenville County. And then I was also a full-time firefighter for the City of Simpsonville Fire Department, in which I worked there and also ran my business at the same exact time. So at some point, the business grew to the point that I had to make a decision, and I decided to stick with my company, and I had to leave the department. But more importantly, the most important thing about me is that I have a 10-year-old daughter, Chloe, who is actually a 4th grade student, goes to Greenville County Schools. And although this is an older picture of her, this was the only one I really had of us in front of a Simpsonville fire engine, so wanted to use that. So today I want to kind of discuss and work through some of the challenges that we have experienced and that I have experienced and endured as an entrepreneur with the creation of Thorne Ambulance Service and pretty much how I got to that point. And so one of the things we'll talk about is the challenges associated with education, some of the limitations there and some of the things that I was told along the way in my journey. We'll talk about buy-in, not only employee team member buy-in, but also customer buy-in. Discuss some of the industry issues that we have faced as a growing service. We'll talk about the accident that drastically changed my life and changed things for our company for a time. And then I'll also talk about kind of Thorne Ambulance of today and what it's like to manage a large EMS system. So the first challenge being education. When I was a junior in high school, I had a guidance counselor who told me, you can't get into a good college with your grades, so you might as well not go. The high school that I went to, Simsbury High School in Connecticut, we were the #1 sender of students to UConn. And if you didn't go to UConn, you went to Yale, you went to Harvard, you went to an Ivy League school. And so the idea that somebody coming out of this high school would go anywhere but those places was just preposterous, and we weren't going to even look at that. I was also told not to waste my time going to technical schools because we needed to go to 4-year universities and go get degrees in those things. Fortunately for me, and I don't think I had anything to do with this, she actually retired at the end of my junior year, and I ended up getting a very good guidance counselor for my senior year who helped guide and direct me much better than these quotes here. So I went to college. I ended up going to Eastern Nazarene College in Quincy, Massachusetts, a small Christian school up there, private school. And I was actually going to school to become an accountant, hopefully becoming a CPA. My goal at that time was to do a job that I could make a lot of money making. Making a lot of money, having a lot of great, nice things, and that's exactly what I was looking for out of a career. But then something happened. I'll talk to you about finding my passion in healthcare in the next slide here. But when I went to leave college after my first full year in college, the college dean sat down with me. We almost had a kind of an exit interview process because it was such a small school. They wanted to know why I was leaving. They said, look, EMS and firefighting is not a legitimate career path. This is not something that you can go do and expect to do for an entire career. In addition to that, you can't do this as a job. You can't support a family. You can't have nice things. You can't do what you want to do if you go down this path. And so I left. And during the time that I was at that school, I actually had started working at Quincy Medical Center, which was a small community hospital located right there in Quincy. They're actually no longer in existence. It was a very, very old building, as you can see here. Boston Medical Center tried to buy them, tried to revive them, but it was a lost cause. But the time that I spent at Quincy Medical Center drastically changed my life and my outlook on my career. And so at 18 years old, I actually went to work in the kitchen of Quincy Medical Center, delivering meals to patients' rooms. I was the guy with the hairnet. So I got to go out and I got to start interacting with patients who were in this hospital. And I got to see that customer service and patient care was not just based on what doctors and nurses can do, but it's based on everybody being involved in healthcare. And so the interactions that I had with patients were so positive, and I saw that it had such a positive impact on them, that I truly felt that I found my passion. And so healthcare became my passion, and that's what I fell in love with doing and couldn't imagine doing anything else. So I left the accounting program to enroll in an EMT program with Northeastern University in Boston. So once I started my career as an EMT in Boston and realized that the dollars I was paid to do that job didn't really equate to the cost of living in Massachusetts, it was time to make a change, time to make a move. And so I went from Boston to Greenville and found that my dollars stretched a lot further. I went from a one-bedroom apartment outside the city to being able to purchase a 3-bedroom home on what I was making as an EMT in South Carolina. When I moved to South Carolina, I went to work for Spartanburg EMS, and at 19 years old, I was the youngest EMS provider that worked for the department at that time. So it was a really great opportunity for me to come in, learn from some more experienced EMTs and paramedics, and to try to learn what it was that this industry was all about. I had a great deal of exposure to the private ambulance industry with interactions that we had at nursing homes and at the hospital ERs, but it was mostly negative. What I found was that the perception was, if you can't hack it working for the hospital or for the government, you go work for a private service because that's where kind of the lower rung of the ladder go to work. There was no professional uniform standards, people were sloppy, there was really no code of conduct. And I started thinking about it. When you look at an ambulance parked next to another ambulance, private versus hospital or county, there's no difference. They both say ambulance, and the public perception is an ambulance is an ambulance is an ambulance. And so what I started thinking was, I need to do something to raise the bar in the private sector, to be able to compete against these hospitals and these government-based ambulance providers, to raise the bar and then not only reach where they're at, but then raise it a step further and show that the private sector can do it even more efficiently and more professionally than most government and hospital services. And so while I was having these thoughts, I was actually working full-time in Spartanburg. I worked 24 hours on shift, 48 hours off shift. And I was also attending paramedic school. So it was definitely a busy time in my life. But when I finally got through paramedic school, I had received some experience as a paramedic in the field. At 22 years old, I decided that I had the freedom and the ability to turn my vision and passion into a reality. And so at 22, I actually founded Thorne Ambulance Service in Greenville. I felt that I was passionate, motivated, and willing to work. A lot of people my age and a lot of people in my industry were not. And so I felt that already gave us a competitive edge and advantage. And I was able to share the vision with other people in my field. Friends of mine that were EMTs and paramedics, they really bought into what I was trying to do. They believed that we could raise the bar if we did it on our own. And so I was able to get the early buy-in from that core group of people. I felt that I understood the challenges of our industry based on being a paramedic and working in the field. And I sought to make a market impact, again, talking about raising the bar and raising the standards in our field. And at the end of the day, I had the inability to accept no as an answer. When somebody tells me I can't do something, when somebody tells me no, that's not possible, to me that just further fuels the fire and lets me know that this is something I have to do. And moving forward, that's exactly what we did. And so this picture right here is actually an ambulance from Spartanburg County. It used to be a Westview Fair Forest EMS unit. And so I purchased this 1997 ambulance as our first ambulance. And what I was telling the group the other day is the front of the truck, when you would go down the highway, the roof would flap because the metal was, I don't know what was wrong with it, but it would flap. And so riding down the road, it was not uncommon to see the EMT or the paramedic up front holding their hand up against the ceiling, trying to keep it from flapping. So the good news is we no longer operate this ambulance. We've come a long way. We have mostly new ambulances at this point, but this is how we got our start. And so a really big dream turned into this big ambulance, turned into what Thorne Ambulance Service is today. So the second challenge I ran into was buy-in. So I had the initial buy-in from my friends who were EMTs and paramedics, but at 22 years old, I probably looked like I was 15. And I couldn't get healthcare administrators and nursing homes and hospitals to buy into the vision of Thorne Ambulance Service. You know, who's going to trust to place the care of elderly patients and sick people in the care of some 15-year-old looking kid? And so we found that we had to build a reputation, which was both a positive and a negative. The positive was we didn't have a reputation. So we were starting with a clean slate. Nobody disliked us, but nobody liked us. So we had a real opportunity to start building a positive reputation in the community by going out there, doing the right thing, and working, you know, in a professional manner and really showcasing what we could do as EMS providers. It was also hard to attract EMTs that were willing to work for a kid. Most experienced EMTs and paramedics did not want to come to a startup ambulance service working for some 22-year-old kid. It just wasn't possible. So to get around this, what I did was I actually, instead of dressing like this to work each day, I would actually come to work dressed as a paramedic in a uniform. And I would represent Thorne Ambulance Service as a paramedic until I got buy-in, people thinking that somebody else owned the company and I just worked for them. And once I got enough buy-in, I was finally able to re-emerge into the market saying, oh, by the way, I own Thorne Ambulance Service. And we were able to start getting opportunities and contracts that way. So things start getting better. The calls start coming in. Revenue starts coming in. And that brings us to our third challenge, industry issues. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, are basically the Medicare police, if you will. They tell us what we can charge, what we can't charge. They tell us how we can get paid or what prevents us from receiving payment. And in 2015, Medicare rolled out a prior authorization program in 3 states. South Carolina was one of those states. And the intent behind prior authorization, in my opinion, was to do away with the private industry. CMS felt that they were spending far too much money on non-emergency transports, mostly for dialysis patients and cancer patients. And so they enacted this prior authorization program that said, okay, private providers, in order for us to pay you for the transports you're going to provide, you have to get pre-approval from Medicare to get paid. And so they rolled the program out right before Christmas, at the end of 2014 actually is when they did it. And you know how hard it is to talk to a federal employee around Christmas time? They're not there. So we did everything we could, we worked as hard as we could, but at the end of the day, the revenue stream virtually came to a halt. We weren't making any money at all, but we were still providing the services with the hope that we would eventually get paid by Medicare. So ultimately, this led to several layoffs in our organization. We reduced our company size by 50%. We saw major reductions in revenue streams. For a time, that number went to 0%, and ultimately it cut our revenue streams in half. And we cut our volume in half. Not because patients weren't in need and didn't need those services, but because we had no way of receiving reimbursement from the federal government for providing those services. Something interesting about the prior authorization program is hospital-based ambulance services did not fall under the program. So as long as you were a hospital-run ambulance service able to bill under Part A Medicare, you did not have to participate. But every private ambulance service falls under Part B Medicare, which fell under prior authorization. So what did we do to meet the challenge of prior authorization and the things that CMS was trying to do to us? We decided to dig in. We became fully committed not only to ourselves, but to the organization and to our mission. At this stage in our company, 5 years in, we had not reached the pinnacle. We had not accomplished all of the goals that I had established when we first started the company. We also felt that by holding out, we would survive this thing, and not only survive it, but thrive following kind of the repeal or whatever would happen with prior authorization because of the disaster that it was. So we felt that if we could survive prior authorization, wait for some of our competition to go away, we could reemerge into the marketplace and be larger and stronger than ever before. We felt that by being resilient, mission-focused, and persevering with a clear vision was going to allow us to stay in the game as long as possible. We had the freedom to do as we desired. Nobody would have blamed me at that point if we had decided to close our doors. The federal government was there, and they were blocking us at every turn. Nobody would have blamed us for shutting our doors. But at the end of the day, we said, no, this is not the end of Thorne Ambulance Service. This is not what we set out to do. So we're going to beat this thing. And again, refused to accept no as an answer. And then our big break happened. A year later, we were actually awarded the Bon Secours St. Francis Hospital contract in Greenville. So during the time that prior authorization happened until this point here, there were 12 ambulance services, private services, that closed down across the state of South Carolina, shut their doors, all gone. But the call volume didn't change. The patients were still there, the need was still there, and eventually Medicare started paying again. Once enough services closed their doors, Medicare reopened their checkbook. They accomplished their goal, they got rid of a large section of the private ambulance industry, and then they backed off. So with limited competition and a real opportunity to reemerge, we end up getting the St. Francis Hospital contract, which virtually doubled the size of our company overnight. It's not just the 2 hospitals in Greenville. It includes the cancer center, it includes several urgent care centers, all kinds of outpatient clinics. It is a big, big contract. So right before we go to implement this, I get into an accident. We're supposed to roll out St. Francis on November 1st of 2016. And on my way to our Lawrence office on October 18th, just a few weeks prior, I'm riding my motorcycle, somebody pulls out right in front of me, and I T-bone them. Fortunately for me, I hit the fender of the vehicle instead of the door. If I hit the door, I don't think I'd be here talking to you today. But because I hit the fender, it allowed me to catapult up and over the handlebars and onto the road. I was wearing a helmet, but it was a half-shell helmet. Not a single scratch on that helmet. The first hit of the pavement was my face hitting the pavement. The picture over here is my left arm, and here's my right leg. So it was a hit-and-run accident, too. So the gentleman that hit me took off, and I went to stand up because I was in the middle of the road. And there was traffic driving, people were still driving all around me, even laying in the middle of the road. And so I went to stand up to run out of the road, and that's when I realized my leg was broken. So I immediately fell back down, and I was stuck there until fire and EMS arrived. The good news is I knew everybody that responded to the call. I knew all the firefighters, law enforcement, paramedics, EMTs, and they tried to put me in a helicopter, which would have cost me $40,000 out of pocket. And so I actually refused the helicopter ride and took the long ride in an ambulance to Greenville Memorial Hospital to the Level 1 Trauma Center. So this is several months post-accident, but after 2 major surgeries in Greenville Hospital where I spent a full week, this is what my arm now looks like today. I have several metal plates kind of down my arm with several pins, screws, everything else holding it together. And I actually have a rod that goes all the way down my right leg now. And prior to the accident, I never had any knee problems. But to get that rod in the leg, they actually had to pull the kneecap out and reinsert that. So now I have knee problems. The very next week after getting out of the hospital, I returned to work. I returned to work in a wheelchair, typically wearing sweatpants and some type of sweatshirt, but as you see there, I did get out and vote still that night. And so this is me in the office. I had very limited use of my left arm. I was told that I would never be able to extend my arm out ever again, that it was going to be stuck somewhat in that capacity. But by November 4th, I was actually taking my first steps following the accident. Now, I'd only taken about 3 or 4 at this point, snapped a picture and quickly got back into a wheelchair, but it was progress. It was taking the steps to do better on the road to recovery. Now, fast forward to January 27th, just 3 months after this accident. I actually fought my first fire on January 27th following that accident. And I was so excited when I got back to the station that I actually took a picture standing up down at my feet just to show that I had done it. When I first got into my accident, I actually had people from the state call in to ask if I would be forfeiting my paramedic credential because they didn't think I would ever be able to do this again. But I remained resilient, I remained steadfast to my commitment to my organization, and I knew that I could absolutely fight through this thing, and that was the day that I did that. But on January 28th, it was a very painful morning to try to get out of bed, but it was well worth doing what I did the night before. So the challenges of managing a large EMS system, this is where I'm at today. So I've survived prior authorization and the government's attempt to shut us down. I survived an accident, a hit-and-run accident, and now today Thorne Ambulance Service is a rapidly growing ambulance service, and there are challenges that are present there. So today Thorne Ambulance Service responds to more than 17,000 requests for service annually. We have a team of almost 100 professionals, which I think this week will probably hit that number with our current orientation class. We have our own in-house billing services where we do all of our Medicare, Medicaid, and commercial insurance billing. And we have a 24/7 communication center. So no matter what time of day or night you call Thorne Ambulance Service, one of our team members will answer the phone. So you always have great direct access to our team, to our staff. Some of the partners that we work with today, we work, of course, with Bon Secours St. Francis. They're one of our largest clients. We work with National Healthcare Company, Regency Hospital, Carolina Center for Behavioral Health, and some of these others here as well. We're actually the EMS provider for 3 collegiate football teams, Presbyterian, Furman, and Clemson. So anytime you go to any of their home games, you'll actually see Thorne Ambulance Service there. And it is a far cry from where we were after prior authorization occurred. So after all the struggles, after all the challenges that we went through during the first 8-9 years of our existence, last year we had the incredible opportunity to be named the 3rd fastest growing small business in South Carolina. And that's not specific to the EMS industry or healthcare. This is in all industries across South Carolina. We were named the 3rd fastest growing. And so we take a look back in 2010, what did Thorne Ambulance Service look like? And this group of 5 right here, these are the initial 5 team members that we had at the company that helped us get our start. The photo on the left here is the first ambulance that we bought, and this one right here is the second one we bought, just in case that one wouldn't start one morning. We purchased this ambulance for $2,500. Now they're a lot more expensive than that nowadays, what we buy, but it just goes to show the transformation in taking a vision and turning it into a reality. This is what we envisioned big things at that time, but this is where we started. And today, this is what Thorne Ambulance Service looks like. We're heavily involved with the South Carolina EMS Association, which does a lot of our advocacy at the state and federal level. We've got a fleet of mostly brand new ambulances at this point. We respond to 911 requests for service. We have the latest and greatest in cardiac technology, cardiac monitor technology. We transport some of the most critical patients in the upstate of South Carolina. And we have a wide range of basic life support and advanced life support vehicles to help support our mission and to better serve our communities. And so that's kind of Thorne Ambulance in a nutshell and kind of how we got to where we're at today. But I appreciate your time this afternoon, and we welcome any questions that you have about our industry, about our story, about government regulation. I can cover any of that.